over here. Okay. Right. So sorry. All right. So once again, you're welcome to the Entrepreneur101 dialogue, where we're trying to discuss a few issues pertaining to youth entrepreneurship development. Today we are looking at the COVID-19 situation. We want to look at what the COVID-19 really is, how it's affecting our businesses, or the impact it's having on our businesses, and then how we can, the opportunities it brings along, and how startups like yourself and mine can take advantage of the situation. So we basically want to look at the impact COVID-19 is causing on our businesses, the opportunities it possibly brings, and how we can take advantage of the situation to better our lives and our businesses. And to help us do this discussion, we have Sylvia, Senu, who is with the UNDP, and then we also have John Armah, who is a serial entrepreneur. So these guys are very good in their field of work, and they're going to help us with the discussion. After they are done with their presentation, we're going to have a floor for question and answers, where every one of us will be given a chance to ask their own questions that they may possibly have. Okay, so my name is Solomon Ajay, and I'm the coordinator for today's session. I am assisted by the Africa Skills Hub, my colleague Leslie Adai. Leslie Adai is here with me, assisting to get this through, and then a few other colleagues joining us to make sure that we get the best of the day. So let me thank all of you again for joining us, and let me welcome my guests, John Armah and Sylvia, to begin the conversation. So hi, Sylvia and John. Hi, Sylvia, how are you doing?
Hi, Solomon, it's a pleasure. Regards to Leslie as well. I haven't seen him in ages. I have to go look for him. But good to be here.
Right. So beginning with John. John, tell us about yourself and your business, and then what your office does to support the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
So basically, for the past 10 or so years, we've been involved in investing in startups, providing business advisory and development services to startups, advocacy and helping to set up some entrepreneurial ecosystems, not just in Ghana, but across Africa and across the globe as well. That's what we've been doing, working with certain key businesses in different sectors, including manufacturing, agribusiness, technology, services, among others, even agribusiness as well. So that's what we've been doing over the period.
Wow, that's great. That's great. And how has the COVID-19 situation affected you and your business?
Well, apart from the increasing cost that you would have, not the increasing, but except for those fixed variables within your business that will continue to rise, like rent costs and so on and so forth. It's actually been good for me as a person and as a business, because you can interface with your clients going digital. So we can work with our clients remotely, advise, do reviews via phone call. We can do audits via phone. They send us the documents. Sometimes we pass through and then determine whether or not we need to do a physical audit of their systems and so on and so forth. The problem that we're facing right now is really with some of the businesses and their trajectory in terms of the resumption analysis for COVID and disruption in their inventory cycles, among others. But these are things that we're addressing with them, which have led to some insights that we're going to share on this call and share with others as well. But COVID has been good for us.
That's great. That's great. Well, we thank God that at least you have not been so hit hard in a negative way anyway. Sylvia, can you get your mic on? Yes, Sylvia.
Yes.
How are you
My
doing?
mic is on.
Tell us about yourself and your business. I mean, what you do at your office to support the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Okay, Solomon, thank you. And I want to say a big thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak on your platform.
You're most welcome.
My name is Sylvia Senu. I work at UNDP currently. as an economic analyst, and I double as a youth focal person. UNDP is a premier development organization. We support governments, we support different aspects of the economy, including CSOs, private businesses, to actually help develop the countries across the world. And in this case, to support, our support goes to Ghana. In terms of what we do with the youth, we support youth policy, we support, we are known actually to support empowerment, youth empowerment and youth advocacy for young people's voices to be heard. And most recently, our whole focus has been, and this whole focus has been pushed by our administrator and also, of course, by the UN Secretary General, but by our administrator, Akim's China, who has really advocated for empowering and supporting young people's innovations. So we do support young people's innovations as well. I'm sure you probably may have heard about YEST, that is the Youth Innovation for Sustainable Development, which we launched last year. And through that platform, we're able to support 16 young innovators. And we provided them with financial support, and then we also supported with business development and mentoring, actually. Yeah, so in brief, this is what we do. But also, let me say that the whole year was really anchored on the Youth Connect platform, which we also launched last year. I'm sure probably a lot more of your members would know about Youth Connect. Youth Connect is a platform that engages young people to empower them with opportunities and job creation, avenues. Yeah. So that's what.
That's great. That is great, Sylvia. That is great. Good to know that you guys have been well supported ecosystem. I believe your office has been hit one way or the other by the COVID as well, whether positively or negatively.
Well, I have to say that in every situation, there are winners and there are losers. And also, in fact, life itself presents us with winners and losers. And I believe this situation is not different. In natural sense, it is one of the pointers in my presentation for today. Life itself presents us with winners and losers. And so I would say that, yes, it's both positive and it's negative. Now we are having the opportunity of working remotely. We've really gone digital in full. Of course, that process has always been there, but in terms of its usage and application, probably was partial, but now it's in full. So since the outbreak, we've been remote working, and we've not actually gone back yet, but we've been having our meetings online and trying to push things online. Yeah. So,
that is great.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, so colleagues who have joined us, Sylvia and John are with us, trying to help us. They're going to help us to understand the tool for the day, COVID-19, and then the youth entrepreneurship system, how the opportunities that it brings and how we as startups can take advantage of them. So we're going to go straight to the presentations. Sylvia will do us the honors and start the presentation. And then afterwards, John will take over. And then afterwards, we'll discuss it. And then we'll take your questions. And then we'll wrap it up. We wouldn't be here for long anyway. Maximum 1 hour we should be off. So yes, Sylvia, the next 10 minutes is for you.
Thank you, Solomon. Let me share my screen so I can speak to some of the pointers.
Please do.
I hope it's trying to load.
Yes, okay. We see your screen now.
Okay, good. So I'm just trying to figure out it. Okay. Wow. What did I do? So how do now I regulate the screen?
The same way you regulate every day. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Okay, so has it changed?
Yes, it's changed.
Good, beautiful.
So there's a quote now.
Yes. So I wanted actually to start with this quote by Napoleon Hill. that in every adversity, every failure really presents us with an opportunity, and it's really embedded in there some seed of, you know, equal or greater benefit. That's on the positive note, because you see, in life, I believe that there's always the negative part, and there's the positive. And so I believe that you must be optimistic, but of course you must be also realistic. So we know the negatives, but we have to look on the brighter side, right?
That's right.
Paying attention to whatever negatives there are. And we know that this COVID-19 really has hit us hard. All economies of the world have suffered from this COVID situation. In actual sense, for Africa, an estimated 90 billion USD is supposed to affect our GDP because of this COVID situation. And I have to say that different aspects of the economy are suffering from this. Individuals, businesses, communities, governments, multilaterals, name them. Not to even mention startups. Yeah, we know that startups are really are really fragile. They are in such precarious situations. It is actually estimated that about 20% or so, or 30% of startups before COVID or in a normal situation have or are already in red zones, where their cash flows are very low. The opportunities available to hire are probably non-existent. Their capacities are not really developed. And now we have COVID, and it is being said that COVID is even going to push more, about 40% more of startups into red zones. It's hitting their capital. I mean, you can imagine, I read on Facebook I think today or yesterday, that there was this business who took about 3 months to set up. It's supposed to be like an eatery. 3 months to set up. And, today they've opened their businesses, but nobody walks in. You can imagine the amount of investments the entrepreneur had to make in rent, in equipping the place and setting it up for business. And today, there are no, there's no business. It hits workforce. We know that startups actually, the ability and capacity of startups to hire is not always very high. So they depend on family and friends in terms of hiring. And a lot of the hiring is quite informal. So a lot more are having to lay off people because really they are not binded by any contracts per se. A lot more are having to cut down on the salaries and wages of workers just to adapt to the system. The market is different, of course, and managing startups is not easy in these times of COVID. But also support to startups. If you have governments hit by this, multilaterals hit by this, and other agencies that support startups hit by COVID, you would also understand that the support for startups is also challenged. In fact, some businesses and some agencies that support startups have had to postpone or put on hold plans to support, emerging startups and also some of the things, because they are having to take a look at this whole COVID situation for their businesses and what it means and the implications for their own businesses. So, what are the highlights from this crisis that we can really learn? One, I've mentioned there are winners and there are losers in every situation. Life itself is like that. And we have, as entrepreneurs, we have to understand that this is what life presents us. In the midst of COVID or out of COVID, that is what life is. And I have to say that this is not the first time the world is going through such a crisis. It always have felt probably that the world was coming to an end when they had from the world wars to the flus, and you can imagine probably they always thought that no, the world is coming to an end. But guess what? They've lived and we've lived and come back stronger, and the world has developed on from some of these crises. So we have to understand that the future itself is disruptive in nature. It is unpredictable. Why is it disruptive? It's because it is unpredictable and it is complex. I mean, a lot of things goes into play for the kind of business environment that we envisage for the future. 3, we have to also know that traffic has moved from physical, from our roads, physical locations where you see many more people on the street now to online. 4, the opportunity we have here presents us as entrepreneurs to pause, reflect, and reinvent. So all is really not lost. It's an opportunity for us to take a look at what we are doing and then see how we can adapt ourselves to the situation at hand. And then knowing or actually finding opportunities in this situation means actually knowing the fact. Because you can't find the opportunities if you do not know the facts and you do not know the challenges that people are presented with. You understand? Because there's this saying as entrepreneurs, we all know that all business opportunities are generated from whatever problems there are. So we have to think of it this way, that if COVID is presenting us with this crisis, then it is an opportunity for us to think through the challenges we have and then what? Come up with solutions that will make us relevant. And I'm happy that some of the young businesses we have around have fully really done this. Some have just switched to different kind of product lines that initially they were not doing. So what do we need to do? We need to, one, and this one I actually picked from a report by McKinsey and Company. We need to actually resolve to address the immediate challenges, like I'm trying to say. First of all, we need to see how this situation is affecting our businesses, and how it's affecting our workforce, our customers, our technology, and our business partners. That thinking process of how is this situation affecting my workforce? How is this situation affecting my customers? How is it affecting the technology? It will surprise you by doing this kind of thinking and addressing the immediate challenges or thinking through. There's a feedback.
Sorry, there's some feedback.
Thinking through. Thinking through the challenges to give us for going forward. We need to actually also address the near term of cash management. You have is limited. You have to already think cutting down to assess your resilience and what you need to do going forward. But I wanted to actually base the whole aspect of finding the solutions on the fact that the future is disruptive. COVID has disrupted the world economy, but the future itself has always been disruptive in nature. And we have said this. And so going forward, it's not just about your degree. It's not just about what you know. It's a mix of complex things, because remember I said that the future is complex and also the future is unpredictable. So you need to move with the times. You have to be, you have to wear this coat or this sense of learning, okay? You have to up your learning ability or your learning agility, quickly adapting to situations, learning fast and moving with it. You need to, as an entrepreneur, be resilient in a way. You shouldn't have that kind of victimization mindset that why is this happening to me? No, it's not only happening to you. There are worse situations people are going through. So you have to understand that you need to be resilient in this COVID situation. And then you need to have grounded optimism. Focus on the positives, like I said. Yeah. So, I mean, finding the opportunities here. And here I actually got this from the Future of Works report by the ILO, the OECD. Yeah, so travel sites have eliminated all these human interactions and have moved online. So as a young entrepreneur, how are you thinking about this? Are you thinking, okay, so if people are now home and they are not coming out, how can I design something to suit, you know, their living home, to make their living home more comfortable, to make their living home more enjoyable? There are several aspects of this, but we know that COVID has hit more of manufacturing and hard-end line of products. But in terms of services, in terms of online digital applications and stuff like that, there are more. So as a young person, you need to think about how can I package probably my goods differently, or how can I deliver my goods differently or my services differently, because now the old business of going to the person physically may not work in this situation. And we probably as Africans and as Ghanaians, we have to now really adapt to this situation more, because I think that the digitization aspect of many of our things have taken time. So it's time for us to think more digital, more virtual in the way we deliver and distribute our services and products. Yeah, yeah. I said this that I've mentioned this once, and we have to understand that there are game-changing technologies that are calling the shots. We can't do business as usual and think that will still remain relevant. We need to apply robotics. We need to look into artificial intelligence and stuff like that. That can really help us to move with the tide, because we can't remain, you know, we can't remain in the old way and think that would adapt or would actually reinvent ourselves in this. We need to actually think through and see how to deliver. So for instance, you have young people who were teaching now coming online. Now we are having this business online. Before we wouldn't have taught through. Before we would have actually thought of going to a certain space and putting all of us together. Yes, probably there may be a vaccine, there may be a cure for COVID, and we may be able to go back to the way we used to do things. But let's keep it at the back of our minds that this way of life is really the new norm, is the new normal. So we have to adjust and reinvent ourselves to fit. In short, thank you. I don't know if I saved time or I can still go on.
Okay, I think you saved time a little bit.
How many more minutes do I have? Because I was trying to run through. Yeah. How many more minutes do I have?
You have just 2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't want to prolong the conversation. So yes, that is really about it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Thank you. One thing I like from your presentation had to do with how we need to rethink our ways of living. There's one thing I've been saying since this COVID-19 situation broke, that for some of us, give us opportunity to rethink our lives. And I think you echoed that part, that things are not that normal. We can't continue to do the things the same way we used to do them. We need to understand that there is a new trend, there's a new normal, and we need to adjust to it by whichever means possible. We need to adapt. So, oftentimes, our issue as a people has to do with the rate at which we adapt to new things and new changes, and sometimes that becomes a block for us to move on. You know, like you mentioned, somebody is let's say a teacher. Now he or she cannot go back to school and teach again. How do you then go ahead and still remain relevant? You know, so the effect of and I would say that our style of change, of adapting to change, is always a problem for us. Before John comes in, what do you have to say, Sylvia, regarding our attitude and our mentality towards adaptation to change?
That's a big one. You know, I've always maintained that mindset change is the most difficult aspect of development work.
Mm.
You know, it's the most difficult, and yet I've always believed that is one of the things that is the low-hanging fruits. You know, because I believe through our own models of life, you know, we can change mindsets, we can change the way people do things, but yet it's the most difficult because it's complex in the fact that people do not really understand why certain things need to be done in a certain way, or why the reasoning has to go in a certain dimension.
Mm.
So yes, when it comes to us, and when it's as Africans and Ghanaians, it's difficult to have this whole mindset change going, because it's mixed with low levels of education, low levels of comprehension of the real situation, the causal effects of what actions there are. So I always advocate for young people, young advocates, young entrepreneurs to use their lifestyles, to use their platforms to advocate, you know, mindset change. Because if I live with my mom, I'm able to say, hey, mom, you know, you can do this. You know, you shouldn't do this. You know, yes, it may take time, but she would, you know, adjust and adapt. Let me tell you this. For instance, my mom goes probably more online than I do. Why?
Mm.
Because of my influence. Even though I was the one who introduced her to using her mobile technology to go online, she has ample time, you know, on her hands. So she's able to do research. And I said, no, if you want to know something, ask Google. It will tell you. And it will surprise you how she's now able to adapt to research on various issues. And now she feeds me back with her findings. So yes, and you see, that's the change in mindset here. She didn't
That's
really
right.
know that she could use, she at first she thought the phone was just for pictures and making calls, but now she uses it more to learn,
Mm.
to learn. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a difficult thing to change in development, and yet it is also a low-hanging fruit that all persons, all entrepreneurs, all change makers should be able to put in and chip in. We shouldn't wait for government to do this, because in actual sense, mindsets start with individuals
Mm.
before it escalates into businesses and communities, and then a national mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That is great. I like how you're able to transform your mom from using the phone for just pictures and you know, now doing more research online. And truth is, that has been one of the major issues with the youth of today. We have the gadgets, but we don't really utilize it to its maximum. You know, we limit the mobile phones to the mere for the normal phone calls and then the WhatsApping and the picture taking, and that is it. Meanwhile, there are lots and lots more that we can do with our phones that we are not doing it. Last time someone was telling me that mobile phones used in Ghana here, we hardly even go beyond 20% of the mobile phones capabilities.
Yeah.
We limit its use, and then thereby we are not able to get the full potential of it. So yeah, I think it's a good point you mentioned that we shouldn't just limit ourselves to you know, to the just mobile phone, the phone calls and WhatsApp.
Can I chip in this?
Go ahead.
Yeah, because the platform, mobile technology, is actually a big avenue for even
Yeah,
entrepreneurs to even market their products, you
exactly.
know, and yet not many entrepreneurs take advantage of it. They'll be doing the thing, they'll be doing some good work in some corner, but reaching very few people because they've not even maximized the power of mobile.
So yes, I know we are John is waiting, but before John comes in, Sylvia, how do you think that the startups of today can utilize mobile phones or mobile technology to market their businesses effectively?
Okay, maybe to start, I have to just say that, I mean, your experience on Facebook, your experience on all these social media handles are what you request for. It is what you want that you get. People tell me, oh, me, I don't use Facebook. I say, no, 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 no. You are getting it wrong. If you just go to Facebook to like pictures and, you know, do gisting, and that's what you get. That's what most of the time, even Facebook will suggest to you. But if you go looking for relevant information or joining platforms that actually will feed you with information and knowledge, or will actually link you up with platforms, with networks that will help your business, that is what you get. As soon as you click one, Facebook keeps suggesting to you more. Okay, yeah. So there's so much you can do with your mobile in terms of even putting your product online, because now the market you'll be reaching is not only in Ghana, it will be, how do you call it? It will be everywhere across the globe.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for this elaborate, presentation. John. Hello, John. How are you doing?
Solomon, I'm here.
Wonderful. So, John, let's hear you. COVID-19 and startups across the globe. Are there any opportunities that it brings, and how can we tap into these opportunities? John, what's your take on this topic?
Well, first of all, I don't know what to add to what Sylvia has put out there, because her topic and what she addressed was quite elaborate. And let me see if I can add a few things to what she said.
Go ahead,
without repeating some of the things that she said.
Yeah.
So again, it's important to understand that, this is the first time that the world has been in crisis, and we've got to have some antecedents to how, we respond to it, and a precedent to learn from what happened in the past.
That's
so
right.
If you do a careful analysis, the likes of Alibaba and some of the Asian tigers grew by over 20% due to crisis. For example, that between 2002 to 2004, right, Alibaba experienced some of its greatest rise in business prior to a defining crisis in their business lifetime. So it's important to put that in context as well. Yeah. Now, if you then fast forward to the global recession, where we had the global financial crisis, we had the likes of Uber, Airbnb, and Co. This is around 2008 and so on and so forth. These guys then piggyback on that global crisis to then grow, because there are questions as to, do we hoard, do we spend? Is it better for you to own assets or let assets go and then you rent? So this whole debate started. In the case of Alibaba, it was whether or not it was it safe for people to interact in person and so on and so forth. So these things have happened over the period. Now, if you pick Africa, for example, in crisis, then you've got to really go back and study how African businesses have risen through crisis. And I'll share a few examples with you. So if you go back to the 1960s, 1970s, and so on and so forth, Ghana experienced our own sort of rebirth of an entrepreneurial economy, because then we were practically introduced to some level of formalized entrepreneurship when the Portuguese arrived here in 1471. I'm laying a context to what we're discussing. And that's where we got introduced to commerce within that era, and then moved on to some other things. So it's important to understand that we've not been immune from crisis, but we've had entrepreneurs like the Efas, the Kenu Furiatas, the Asuma Bandes, the Sikins, and so on and so forth. We got to study them and how they rose out of crisis. So what has this global crisis taught us so far? Well, the world is today experiencing what we call demand shocks, which means that people then decide whether or not they are interested in X type of goods or they are not interested in X type of goods. So you realize that during COVID, you're not asking yourself whether you want to buy the new Gucci bag or the new Nike shoe. You're focusing on things that are tangible enough to keep your life going, so food and so on and so forth. So various services have been disrupted or put on hold due to COVID. You have certain decreased consumer spending on clothing, on recreation and entertainment, travel, and so on and so forth. So industries typically that have thrived include food, entertainment, education, sports, fitness, services, even appliances, even fintech and payments, because you want to pay things when you are home and so on and so forth within that regard. What we've also seen is, some widespread restrictions on trade, which means that companies that either to had a limited supply or stock will now be with trouble, because they will not be able to import certain base materials, raw materials, or get the needed stock to replenish and to supply the markets in which they are in. What we've also seen are some temporary business closures, because some businesses, the African economy has largely been a brick and mortar society. And so you don't have businesses that can interact offline. And even with the offline, when I'm speaking to the opportunities, you realize that you've got to start thinking about how we combine traditional models with innovation. For example, it's not enough to say people should get online because mobile penetration is high, and so people should use apps. No. What we have in Africa is a large informal base, which also knows how to use USSD, because that's what they use to load up credit and so on and so forth. So in thinking digital, you've got to think, what local experience can I learn from in being innovative? We've seen governments realign budget source, healthcare spending, and so they're realigning things that they should have spent on maybe essential construction and so on to the expense of that sector to help, and we've got to look at that. We've seen businesses revise their quarter one, quarter two targets, quarter three targets, end of year targets, because they've been hard hit around these. We've seen certain employees also lose income because of this crisis that we're in. So it's a big challenge that we have faced so far. But what have we learned from this? One, that so many businesses don't have contingency plans, what we call the business resumption plan, which is that if X were to happen within my business cycle, how do I halt, how do I jumpstart, and how do I go back to market and still maintain some level of market share without an appreciable increase or loss to that market share that you hold. What we've also seen is high dwindling revenues for businesses, especially those that have direct contact businesses. You have to go to the market to buy stuff. You have to go to a shop to do business. You have to go to an office to do business. That's not working. What we've also seen is businesses that are unable to meet employee obligations because, for example, there's something we call burn rate in business, which is the amount of money you have and the runway or the number of months it can keep you. Some businesses will go for 3 months, some will go 6 months, and so on. For those that can just go for 2 months, can you imagine what's going on with little revenue at this point? There's a principle we call furlough, which is that X business will keep you on contract, but then maybe they graduate your salary in terms of 30% to 20% or maybe 60% as business improves. So it's a huge thing to look at. We're also seeing increasing weight or overheads by businesses because, yes, you are paying rent. What do you do in terms of no revenue? How do you cover for the remaining rent that will be happening? Or how do you cover for other obligations within business as well? We've also seen disruption in credit cycles. For example, if X firm says it's going to pay you in 30 days and doesn't pay you, what happens to you? So this is also a big issue for many startups. And here we are considering startups that have just started, those that are starting, or those that are in some maturity or growth stage. We've also seen a disruption in funding cycles where businesses that were looking to raise money can't raise money and have to think about, oh, so this guy put me on hold, what do I do, and so on and so forth. That is also a big challenge. We've seen disruption in project timelines, especially if your budget is CSO supported or donor supported, because then there are halts in disbursements and so on and so forth. Procurement delays and so on and so forth have also been happening in our sector. So one, what should we do? What should businesses do? And then what are the opportunities that are available for many of these businesses that are within our country? I'll share a few with you for us to look at. Are you ready?
So go ahead.
Number one, we are saying that businesses must restructure and restart. Here, what we are saying is that begin to rethink your business model. Business models that have thrived so far are those that have been traditionally driven and based on the understanding of the local economy, again, within the geography that we're in. So it means that while you're growing locally, think sub-region, think competitive advantage, think more traditional and innovation combined, but also think in terms of, if some products don't bring in some level, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. So for example, the companies that have 3 products and one product brings X revenue covers just operational cost. which is about 1% of total revenue. And then the other line of business that's bringing you about 20, 30, 40% of revenue. In this time, is it worth putting productive effort into the 1% or focusing on the 30% and aggravating and thinking, what will the customer lifetime value be like? How will my customer change over this lifetime? What would he look like? How much will his paying power be? Does my product have staying power? Does it have earning potential? So it's a good time to begin to think about some of these things. So what we're realizing is that most companies that have some hold on the supply chains in terms of, from source to market are doing better. And within this area, you have different players. You have facilitators, you have enablers, you have manufacturers, and I'll explain that in a bit. You also have businesses that must begin to look at reducing cost of running, cost of production, what we call OPEX, operational expenditure as well. So you begin to cut non-essential things within your business just to streamline costs, and then that pushes a bit on revenue, and then you should be able to float a bit because you're hoarding on cash, you're extending payment timelines, but also that you're able to meet certain production targets that bring in some revenue to keep your float. Business must also begin to look at the customer acquisition cost. How much is costing me to get clients? For example, there are firms that would traditionally have sent staff out in cars and so on and so forth and say, go and look for clients, etc., etc. But today in digital, you may want to do more cold calls. You may want to use MailChimp and so on and so forth, just to keep that rapport with clients going, just to keep donors in tune with you, just to educate them more, just to figure out really in the consumer's mind what type of benefit best use them in the product that you're giving them. So in this time, a product that used to be emotional may be functional for a certain consumer. A product that was price sensitive may not be price sensitive for a certain client, or actually will be more price sensitive to a consumer. You've got to be able to think about those things and determine what value you're offering to these clients in terms of solutions within the type of benefits that you're offering. So it's important to look at that. Now you've got to also look at your marketing strategy. So if you are doing more offline based, you may want to do more online based. There's something called retargeting and so on and so forth that you've got to look at. You've got to also revise your organizational plans. So if, for example, you were looking to raise funding at some point, well, cash is king now. The raise for cash is going to be higher than ever. So you've got to build your historical data. If it's not audited accounts, at least unaudited accounts. This is a time to increase engagement with your board members and staff to determine in Q1, what did we do as a business? How can we improve? You do a year-on-year, what we call the actual versus budget scenarios, and begin to use data based on real assumptions to validate your business model and come back to market Q2, Q3, and determine look, if you don't have your data sets right, info memo, financial plans, and the data behind it does not make sense, you will not raise money because now people have spent money that they had, or people are hoarding money, and we want sectors that have an appreciable, what you call ROI or return on investment, to put their money in. So it's very, very important for you to look at. Businesses must think digital in the expansion, but like I said, it's not enough to just think apps. Think USSD, among others, in the way you go about your business. So basically, which sectors are we seeing? Oh, one more thing. Sylvia mentioned skills. Yes, skills is a big deal for many startups and for businesses, but look at skills more in terms of what is my employee lacking that affected my business growth prior to COVID? Because now there's some level of extra time. So while you empathize with staff, put them on some personal development plan or some skills development plan to come back. So if it's advanced Excel, let that staff master it. So if you have to bring accounting services in terms of bookkeeping in-house, you bring it and then you save yourself maybe 700,000 or 3,000 into the business. So these are things that you've got to look at. So things that you outsource most must come back into the business, right? Let me share with you some sectors that we think, in conclusion, will help many people begin to refocus and see what traditional business means to an economy. So there's a report by, I think his name is John Sutton. John Sutton gives us an enterprise map of Ghana, and he mentions certain critical areas that pre-independence, post-independence have continued to thrive and are feeding off other sectors. And I'll mention a few with you. Number one, cocoa processing was led at the time by Cadbury, Cargill, Real Products, Plot Enterprise, and Co. at the time. Number two, salt production at the time had a major impact on business. So you had the palm brushes and so on and so forth. You had oil palm being one of the best sectors because it feeds agribusiness production and has an on-site into industry in terms of what they use the base materials for. So you had Benso Oil and so on and so forth. You had agribusiness, which is still run by the Irani brothers, Takadi flour mills, and so on and so forth as well. You have the non-alcoholic beverages sector as well, which was also huge at the time, and is still huge. And you have the alcoholic beverage sector within that period. You have wood and wood products, textiles and garments, you have cement and quarrying, you have building and construction, you have metals, pharmaceuticals, you have chemicals, you have plastics and rubber. And these are traditional businesses that have continued to exist along this time. So, critical thing, what are people buying now? The garment factory is growing at an exponential rate. True or false? True. Digital is growing at an exponential rate. Fintech is growing at an exponential rate, right? Food is growing at an exponential rate. Education is growing at an exponential rate. Health is growing at an exponential rate. So what it tells us is that you must then plant innovation into these sectors. So figure out, are you a facilitator? So Uber is a facilitator between transport owners and consumers. Where do I want to play in the digital space? Figure that out as a client from a consumer's perspective. What is the staying power? What is the earning potential? What's the paying power? And begin to look at what competitive advantages you have in going sub-regional, post-3-year plan based on your business resumption plan. Think of it if you're an enabler or a manufacturer, which is on the core base, do I want to control supply chain like what M-Pharma is doing? So M-Pharma today is disrupting by saying, look, we're stocking medicine, but beyond stocking medicine, we're offering medicine on a credit basis, partnering with local actors, with banks, and offering you credit lines on even drugs, but also providing supply of critical medicine to key industries. So that's also huge. Take AgroCenter, for example. These are companies that continue to grow. What AgroCenter is doing is aggregating gross demand of X product from these guys who are growing and cooperatives, ordering and stocking and saying, if you need X guaranteed tonnage, I can give it to you. And using digital to do that. They've gone further to say, we also fund these farmers to deliver value. So in conclusion, look, even CSOs are harmonizing their policies by being local. MasterCard today has country offices that are operating out of continent. So they're looking more to work with local actors and so on and so forth. So this is a good time to get your operations in order, review your inventory and ensure that you have some stock. If you don't, try and cut down, expand, diversify product development, build staff capacity, reduce operational costs, see whether or not you can retire some capital assets, extend credit period as well, but begin to rethink really from a consumer's perspective. What will that consumer be thinking 6 months from now? This is where I'll end for now.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive. That's impressive, John. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you, John. John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. So a quick one. I want to find out from you, from your dealings with startups over the years, you mentioned some key things, including restructuring and rethinking the business model and the strategies and all that. Now, from your dealings with startups over the years, do you see startups in Ghana per se easy to adapt and accept this changes to do the business restructuring, the remodeling, and rethinking everything, all those things? How do you see the startups bracing this new challenges?
So one, there's a capacity gap within our industry where people are thinking, starting a business just means, and that's what people keep saying, oh, just start. And that's why I shared with you the report by John Statton to examine businesses pre-independence, post-independence, and the resilience factor with them. It's something that people have to do on their own to figure out. So build that capacity to understand modeling. Modeling here refers to the core assumptions. Many businesses don't have the assumptions needed to validate their business model. So they're really running on gut feeling, on hunch, but not real data. I'll give you an example. If you take someone who's planning for an agribusiness venture, he's got to determine, one, am I focusing on a niche market or focusing on the mass market? Because the price points will differ. So if I was doing, for example, cassava is a low price commodity because the end product can be either alcohol, can be gari. But within that, gari is more a mass product than alcohol being a niche product because the spirit can serve industry. So that he's got to think about it in this form. If I take a consumer's plate and what they consume each day, how many ingredients do they use? Which do they use most? Which costs easier to produce? And so on and so on. So there's something called a yield rate. The yield rate refers to, for example, if I was growing pepper and I had one crop and this crop is estimated to produce X. What is the rate of change in loss? What should be the applicability in terms of fertilizer and so on and so forth? What should the monitoring be like and so on, so that you do risk mitigation measures against the foreseeable losses or risk to what you have planted. This must happen. If you take, for example, groundnut oil processing, so you're doing groundnut oil, what's going to happen with that chaff that you have? Can I create a new industry for that as well? In fact, let me even simplify it for you. If you take someone who's doing construction, the core documents they need for that construction, they may not have it. So if you have Gehok says they want to expand into, let's say, alcohol because they import bulk of their spirits, you've got to look at one. As if I was doing this, they will need pre-feasibility studies. Do they have it or not? I may initiate from a consultancy perspective. So instead of waiting for someone to bring me a business to say, do business plan, I've got to think innovation. How do I partner with this firm and explore their value chain and help them construct X factory to be able to increase production, reduce cost, but also ensure that they have that base material always in supply. So I'll do pre-feasibility for them. I will do HAZOP for them. I'll do, apart from HAZOP, then I'll do the business plan for them, then do the financial modeling, considering the production capacity of that machine, considering the electricity costs, consumption costs, considering the total manpower needed, and then determine whether shift systems will work, and so on and so forth. Determine whether I'll do a percentage of levelized cost in pursuing solar against being on the grid. So if you don't get those base assumptions right, and that's what startups are facing. Startups are not focusing on the core assumptions. And that's why you have many of them who are failing, many of them who are not scaling. Nigeria is raising more capital than Ghana. Ask yourself why.
Okay, so John, I'll throw this question to John and also Sylvia. Hi, Sylvia, are you there? Hello, Sylvia.
Hello, Solomon, I'm here. I was muted, listening keenly.
Right. So I want to throw this question to both of you. What kind of, now, I think like all that we said, we realize that sometimes one way or the other are in need of certain things that we really need to get our businesses back on track and sustain our businesses. Now, my question is, what kind of support do you think that startups need at the moment, that we should focus on at the moment?
Arguably, capital support or financial support is really needed here because, you already know the government has announced some relief fund for SMEs. Of course, the conversation, and we all know that if you did the math, as in terms of the number of SMEs we have, and then the amount that has been allocated, you are looking at some very paltry amount. But more than ever, I think that startups will need some cushioning in terms of finances to keep them afloat. But more also very important, one point you have to note in this time, what startups actually also need is that mentoring and coaching in terms of business development. Look at the kind of information John has put out. Not many startups may be previewed to this kind of information. Not many startups will take the right decisions in this crisis time. So it is important also that they get that mentoring support on how they can scale down or reinvent themselves or reinvent themselves in general. So two things. It is about capital or financial support and also mentoring support.
Right, John, do you agree with Sylvia?
Yes, I do. I mean, she's been right on point. What we've got to also look at is, even this capital we're giving startups, we need to understand the root causes of the startups and the challenge. Some of them don't need money. Some of them, you can even capitalize on this stimulus package and grow it exponentially. So you do what we call complementary finance, which is that I'll offer you X as a startup if you were bringing in equipment, and have X party match it. And that way you reduce what we call the KYC requirements of maybe a bank, a rural bank, and so on and so forth. But you also attach the person to a risk officer who can clearly monitor the investment to ensure that they don't divert funds. because that's what many businesses do. They divert funds, they're not accountable, they're not responsible. The margins on the products are low. So they may get someone, an accountant somewhere, to cook some books for them just to apply for the loan. But that is not what the business really needs to go. We must examine that. So within the type of capital, you have what we call invoice discounting, revenue-based financing. You would have convertible notes and so on and so forth. And these businesses, you've got to look at, so the supplier's credit, there's their credit lines. It must not be a blanket solution. It must be a business-specific solution. So if NBSSI is using that, then what we've been saying, and NBSSI I think is doing, is use your BAC, which is the business advisory centers across the country, assign business development officers, even if it's online and it's through a technology portal, have them build their concept notes, have them attach the relevant guarantees. Guarantees here, I'm referring to things that reduce risk, because there's a risk element. So is it invoices? Let them attach. If it's 3 quotes, let them attach. Then you make businesses responsible as you go along. What do businesses need to stay sustainable at this point? One, get professional help. In other markets, you would get a business development officer, management consultant, a lawyer, and offer them vested shares. What we call vested shares here refers to a company ceding a percentage of its shares to experts in exchange for a skill whatsoever, and saying that if you were to meet X, Y, Z based on your job description or KPI, you own these shares and they become physical assets to you. If you don't, you lose it. So that even if you are not paying me, I'm part owner of your business. Or you put the business on a retainer to review your cost functions, the unit economics in the business. How much do all these production units account for in the final product and its price? Now, if I were to spread this product on X amount of people and move in volumes, would that be my brand? Would that be my model? And so you would be sort of a standard water. So, but then you bring in franchise arrangements where local owners can set up their own production units and sell for you. This same thing can apply to fertilizer as well. So if you build those unit economics, you'll be fine. Number two is in the financial modeling that they have as well. When you've done that, now build data within the business, your management reports and so on and so forth. Have someone feed you with that. Then think traditional and innovation. So don't just go online. That's not the kind of economy we have. Online will go 3 years, 4 years from now, but combine online and offline capacity as well. Get your info memo in order. Get your business plans in order. Business can even be a pitch document as well. Get your financial policy in order. Get your HR policy in order. Get your customer service plan in order. So even if your staff is working from home, your staff can actually talk on the phone from home, and it will still sound so professional without even monitoring. There are others that we can look at, but look, this is the time for you to dig deeper and look at value chains. If it's agribusiness, don't just go into farming. There's seed production. Don't just go into seed production. There's agrochemicals. Not just agrochemicals, there's contract manufacturing. So think bigger, think deeper, but think realistic. And then don't be focused on whimsical things that people call passion and passion. Passion doesn't pay bills. Passion gives you staying power. What you need is a product that the market needs that will continue to grow, and you having the relevant skill to drive it regardless, and we'll be fine.
That's fine. That is great. So thank you, guys.
Can I chip in solo?
Yes, Sylvia, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying that yes, I fully agree with what John is saying, but we have to understand that the informality nature of SMEs in Ghana and especially in our context here in this country makes some of these things that is exposed quite difficult, in terms of getting professional help, offering vested shares and those kind of things. These are recommendations that businesses or SMEs that are quite formal in nature, that have some seeming levels of structuring or structures, are able to take up. But for the kind of SMEs we have, and we have to be realistic here, we have to understand that a lot of our SMEs are informal in nature, and they are not even properly structured to take advantage of some of these recommendations. So perhaps the low-hanging kind of recommendations that John put out at the end of them getting their house in order is what really should be the starting point for a lot more of our SMEs. They have to really start thinking about putting their client, their customer relation plans, their business plans in order, their pitching docs in order, so that they cannot take advantage of the situation. You understand? But at this instance, sorry?
I'm just going to chip
Sorry,
into
John.
what you just said. Yeah.
Yes, please.
No,
So there's an assumption that we think that the informal sector does not have certain structure. That's what I was telling, that you need to define the classes of people we're engaging. One is you have the informal sector that largely does not have physical addresses, pay tools, and so it's a family and friend business that we call household enterprises. Then you have the typical medium-sized businesses who have some degree of structure. So if you are rolling out a technology portal, you're adding business development officers to bridge that gap. Mind you, let's go into the household, typical informal sector. The lady who sells in the Kanishi market knows her cost. She puts that money in one part of her bag or her cloth. She keeps her profit in one bag. So she's keeping some level of bookkeeping. Now that same lady also comes to, you go to her to buy food. And the way she talks to you is typical better customer service than even the medium-sized service person would do. But how is it that that woman in the market is making more money than that guy who is in that office paying $2,000 rent and can't even get a bank loan? Yet that informal SME is getting a bank loan. She has some level of strategy. She just doesn't understand it, but even pays an accountant to get a simple account for her to go and give to the bank to get an SME loan. So that formality, we must begin to translate it. We must begin to teach these small people.
John, sorry, John, but you agree that the woman who sells at Kanishi doesn't do this accounting, doesn't go to consult accountant to get documentation that go for the loan. This financial institution actually approach them and then offer them the kind of support that they need.
The point. That's the point.
So, yeah, so I'm going to think, is it just about getting the books straight or the books right? Because all these girls on the street doesn't even do books.
No, hold on. That's what I've just said. What I'm saying to you is that you have three classes of people. The informal sector person who doesn't have books, but has her documents and her cloth that she uses, and is engaging with a different type of financial institution. So she's dealing with a Susu guy. She's dealing with a microcredit guy. And the microcredit needs to see, oh, so this is how much I've been putting in my account. Run the account for 3 months. So that her requirements for a facility is different. But must she stay within that zone? She must grow out of it. So that is where companies like MBSA and Co are reaching out more. Even MasterCard and Co are considering, how do we get into that lower chain? They don't need to create the big audited account. They can create a one-page simple statement of account. We call it statement of affairs. So if you're familiar with some accounting, you know that that company will simply create a statement of affairs than another. Then you have the formal medium-sized company. That's why we have MSMEs. MSMEs refers to micro, small, medium. So that medium and small business necessarily will need audited accounts if you want to get money from a bank. If you want to do invoices counting, you must need an off-taker agreement to do that. So let's think, when we are thinking solutions, let's think of it from all the classes of people, the 3 of them or the 4 of them. What set of unique information do we require them to have to be competitive? And then what is their growth structure like? What's their growth plan like? Look, in the market system, you have a queen, a market queen. She controls supply. Then she gives to the end user who is supplying. So there's some level of credit cycle between the queen and the one who is supplied to. So they have their own structures similar to the other ones that we are giving. So we can't just give one advice to just one class.
So in our system, you could link that to our association that we join, right?
Which association would that be?
I mean, talking about the market queen systems, the market queen as in the person that leads them, make sure that she had the records of all the people, she had the contact with them.
Exactly.
Can you link that to, let's say, a group like, let's say, the Ghana Startup Network, talking about association where everything is kind of formalized and there's a leader that helped them to do XYZ?
Look, we that association kind of arrangement helps in policy advocacy, right? But we've got to create benchmarks, for example, for assessing what pre-qualifies a startup to access funding from the stimulus package. The question that begets all of us is, what kind of startup are we considering? If it's an early stage startup that does not have any collateral whatsoever, then you may be considering credit guarantees such as joint and several guarantee, director's guarantee, assignment of rights, right? Assignment of rights to the equipment that they are buying, right? Joint ownership and those things. And so it can't be a blanket policy for that. If we are creating associations, then the association must come up with required benchmarks on business performance. How do we assess the general startup liquidity environment? How do we assess the general startup environment? So just like the doing business report, the ease of doing business report, what should we measure startup and scale with? So globally, there are acceptable standards, but in Ghana, we've got to think of it. And hear me when I say this. Don't ever think that the market woman does not have some level of structure. Look, the watcher woman is making more money than somebody on this call, maybe in some office sitting, on some home sitting somewhere. But yet, she's able to get some loan. So if you are in that middle class market, please, the banks have their requirements. Venture capital firms have their own requirements. You know, there are things like EBITDA and things that we think that startups don't need to know, but they must know. And not until all of us on this call begin to tell the people the right things on what they must build and present, it will be just thinking, I have my money, come to me and I'll give you money because you have that idea. You must also be willing to trade my knowledge for you for some shares. Is that not it? Otherwise, how do we grow them?
I think,
I think that, Solo, can I come in? I think that largely we all agree with what John is saying. Yes, partnerships and, you know, fostering these kind of partnerships and you know, and so on. It's important for business to grow and for us to play at a certain level. Okay, but what we have at hand is different. Nobody is saying that we should do a one-size-fits-all solution. No.
Yeah.
But realistically, you making more money from your venture doesn't mean that you have the structures. It doesn't mean that you are more formal. And that we have to understand. I mean, if I decided that, look, by this roadside of mine, there are many more people passing, there are school children passing, and so I can sell ice creams to them, and I start making money. It doesn't make me formal. I start being formal when I start putting in the structures, that I start looking at, okay, so what is this I'm doing? Draw out the business plan, draw out this, put in the systems that shows that, yes, I'm considering this venture as a business. And we all know that not many of our, you know, businesses are doing that, startups are doing that. So we are on the same scale, no one size fits all, of course, but the levels at
Sylvia, in this instance, what do you recommend should be the modalities for startups to access this government loan? I mean, this government support that is being worked on by the NBSSI.
I mean, I can tell you clearly that I understand that the NBSSI has already put up some, how do you call it, guidelines on accessing the loans. And you ask the right question, what should platforms like yours be doing? It's about you now making available these kind of guidelines and requirements available to small scale businesses and startups for them to position themselves to take part of this material. I'm not going to recommend for the NBSSI, and rightly so, you should understand from the background on which I'm coming. I know that they are putting out some guidelines for businesses to access, and your platform can use these guidelines to train or to kind of equip your members so they can also take advantage of the relief fund.
But apart from the government supporting, so now the government wants to support, let's say, 200,000 startups. But you and I know that there are more than 200,000 startups in the country. I mean, sorry, SMEs, I should say. And then and most of the times to even such monies hardly even get to the real, you know, beneficiaries in quote. What role do you guys think that the private sector also have to play in supporting the startup ecosystem in some times like this?
I should say not only the private sector, all aspects of the economy. And even in terms of development partners, the whole conversation has been about how can we build back better? We've been hit by COVID, but how can we build back better? So even for development partners, of course, there are different levels of thinking through on how we can support innovations, how we can support businesses in this time so that we do not have, so that we do not erode totally the gains we've made on achieving the sustainable development goals. So the support system, believe me, I believe is going to be strong. It's going to be coming from different levels. Of course, there are businesses that are making many gains, like MTN, like the different telcos and Zoom. I mean, many more digital platforms are making gains. So now it will be about them also reinvesting some of these gains back into supporting other businesses to come back. But we also understand that government, the IMF, the World Banks, the different partners, and even in this situation, our own Ghanaian businesses, if you look at the kind of effort they've put together in coming up with the private sector fund for COVID, and the kind of tremendous work they are doing to support government efforts in dealing, in responding to the COVID situation, I should think that going forward in terms of recovery, the support system is going to come from not only the private sector, but from all sorts of angles, including that of the development partners.
On that note, Sylvia, I'll ask you directly, what is your office, the UNDP, doing at the moment to support, or what plans do you have to support the ecosystem? I mean,
Thank
from
you.
the UNDP perspective.
Okay, so in this serious crisis time, it's not only about the UNDP. In fact, we've come together, all the UN agencies are together in this as one. So as soon as the whole situation happened, the World Health Organization, WHO here in Ghana, put us all together. Of course, it's being coordinated by the UN resident coordinator's office. So the resident coordinator, who is the head of all the UN agencies here, put us all together to come up with a plan on how we are going to support the situation. So you have different angles, from giving out support to governments, from supporting medical equipment, PPEs, and now it's also about the recovery. So there's a plan, there's a whole plan, detailed plan that the UN is preparing actually on how to build back better. Okay, and there are some 5 angles, and we've received guidance from the global office. So it's not just about Ghana, it's about the whole globe.
Right, so I think time is fast spent. We've gone past our scheduled time. But John, before we go, tell us, what exactly is your office doing at the moment to support the startup ecosystem? What specific things are you guys doing to support the system at the moment?
I can't say much because that's our strategy, but we're working with X-type businesses to scale up, especially those that we have investments in, those that we announce an investment in a couple of days or month, or within the month, ensuring that they are at least cash flow resilient. And then we are pumping more money into a number of these companies. What you will see in the next month will be something that I think the ecosystem has been lacking, and that would be a game changer to bridge the gap between Nigeria and Ghana in terms of having that investment. There's too many fragmented pieces within our market, but I think greater collaboration within the space will help change the issues around access to capital, access to market, access to scales, and then we'll begin to see that. So basically improving business development to our clients, existing clients, ensuring that our investees are resilient, and also raising more capital to ensure that we're able to feed them and feed others as well within the next 1 month.
Wow, that is great. That's great. So we gotta get ready to wrap up, and wrapping up, what will be your final words, John?
Well, I think that the Bank of Ghana has reduced the base points, and so the Ghana reference rate is a bit low, which means that if you're coming to me, then your proposal must be something that I want to look at because I want competitive advantage, competitive returns. But that has to be based on a competitive proposal. So startups now have got to think resilience, have got to think markets, have got to think growth, and an appreciable ROI for us within this industry. Number 2 is what we're going to see, and you can hold me to it, is with some level of absorption in terms of big players trying to move into some mass markets and so on by adopting local players who have some data. Unfortunately, Ghana, we are still lagging. There are about 4 or 5 people who are doing that. We see cross-mortal play in terms of replication of models within subsectors. What I mean is that, for example, you have payment solutions for maybe tech stuff, so you can do everyday payment on X and Y. We'll see same for agribusiness. We are seeing same for health. And so there'll be dedicated payment gateways for some of these things that will be a game changer as well. Then finally, look, like I've said, whenever you're thinking business, think traditional plus innovation, improve capacity, review inventory, review cost and operations, and focus really on the core assumptions, and make sure that, look, you have that drive that no one can ever pin you down. Go back and read that report I mentioned earlier and figure out 10 resilient traits that make you you, that no one can ever get to. When you focus your mind that you can't be beaten in your mind, even when you lose things in life, you still be a winner because you're ready to bounce back.
Wow. Thank you, John.
Nice
Thank
one.
you so much for your time. Now, Sylvia, what would be your final words to the startups in Ghana and across the globe?
So I think yes, that's just on a lighter note. But I think
Yeah,
John
sure.
quite wrapped it up well. That I mean, these are hard times.
For real.
We all have to know that, and we all know that. The pinch is not being felt by you alone. Wherever you are, whatever hustle you are about, you should know that the pinch is not being felt by you alone. But one key thing you should take from this meeting is that it is time for you to stop, pause. It is time for you to reflect. It is time for you to re-strategize. And it is time for you to reinvent yourself as a business. That's what I would say.
Wow, that is great. That is so great. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time this morning, moving to afternoon anyway. So we have explored a few opportunities and a few ways of how we can restructure our businesses, how we can rethink our operations, and what we need to do moving forward to ensure that our businesses are being sustained, to ensure that we get the help that we need, and to ensure that we always stay relevant as startups, as business people, and to make returns and gains. So this has been the Entrepreneur 101 dialogue, having been with Sylvia, Senu, and John Armah. This conversation has been recorded, and we're going to play it back on our networks, the Ghana Startup Network page on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp, and all that, across other platforms for all our folks to get access to it. So we thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time, and we'll call it a day and see you next time. Many thanks.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Yeah, do same.
Wonderful.